Imagine this for a second. You wake up tomorrow, check the news, and it says the entire world is in debt. Not your country, not your neighbor, not that one irresponsible friend who bought a sports car on a credit card. Everyone. The total bill? $317 trillion. That number is so big your brain immediately gives up and says, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. It's like when someone says the distance to the sun and your mind just hears, very far, don't worry about it. But here's the problem. This isn't monopoly money. This is real debt. The United States owes $36 trillion. China owes $15 trillion. Japan owes $10 trillion. Every major nation you can name is buried under IOUs. Add it all up, and global debt is about 330% of global GDP. Which means the world owes more than 3 times what it produces in a year. Now, here's where your brain should slam on the brakes. Because debt has a rule, a very simple rule. For every borrower, there must be a lender. Debt is zero-sum. Someone owes, someone owns. So if the world owes $317 trillion, who exactly is sitting on the other side of the table? Who's the lender? Because it can't be the world. The world can't owe money to itself any more than you can lend money to yourself and then charge yourself interest and somehow get rich. Yet, that's basically what we're told. Oh, don't worry, governments owe it to each other. Or, it's just numbers in a system. Or my personal favorite, it doesn't really matter. Funny how it suddenly matters a lot when you miss a payment. So, let's slow this down and make it human. Imagine the entire planet sitting in one giant room. 8 billion people, every worker, every taxpayer, every business owner, every government. And someone stands up and says, okay, everyone, collectively you owe $317 trillion. Naturally, someone in the back raises their hand and asks the most obvious question in human history. Cool. Who do we pay? That's the paradox. If everyone owes money, who owns the money? Because debt doesn't just disappear into the void, it doesn't evaporate, it sits on someone's balance sheet as an asset. And when you follow the paper trail, it doesn't lead to everyone. It leads to a very small group. Let's start peeling this back. First bucket, central banks. About $25 trillion of global debt is held by central banks. The Federal Reserve, the Bank of Japan, the European Central Bank, each sitting on about $5 trillion. Now, here's where people usually relax and say, oh, okay, that's fine then. Governments own it. Except they don't. Take the Federal Reserve. Despite the name, it's not a government department. It's a private institution owned by member banks. Banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi. Those banks receive guaranteed dividends, 6%, every year. So when people say the government owes money to itself, what they really mean is the government owes money to a private banking system that is legally structured to look boring so no one asks questions. That's bucket 1. Next bucket, institutional investors. This is the big one, about $120 trillion. Pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, sovereign wealth funds. Now, at this point, someone always says, wait, pensions? That's normal people's money. And yes, technically, but ownership inside those institutions is extremely concentrated. The top 10% own the overwhelming majority of stocks and bonds, which means the income generated by that debt doesn't flow evenly to retirees sipping tea. It flows upward. Management fees, asset concentration, control over capital allocation. The system looks broad. The benefits are narrow. Third bucket, foreign governments. About $30 trillion. China holds around $3.2 trillion, including a large chunk of U.S. Treasuries. Japan holds over $1 trillion in U.S. debt as well. But here's the detail people skip over. This isn't the citizens of China lending money to the citizens of the U.S. like some wholesome global bake sale. These assets are controlled by state elites, central authorities, and financial institutions, not average workers. Fourth bucket, Wealthy individuals, roughly $40 trillion. This is where the mask really comes off. The top 1% globally hold enormous amounts of debt assets, and within that group, the concentration gets even more extreme. The top 0.01%, around 800,000 families, control about $10 trillion. 800,000 people. That's not even a large stadium crowd. Now, let's do a quick reality check. Add up what we've identified so far. Central banks, institutions, foreign governments, wealthy individuals. That gets us to about $215 trillion, which leaves around $102 trillion held by smaller institutions, corporate treasuries, and middle-class retirement accounts. But even there, the distribution isn't equal. It still tilts heavily towards those who already have capital. So when you zoom out and strip away the polite language, the answer becomes painfully simple. The lenders are the wealthy. Everyone else is the borrower. Not because of a secret meeting in a volcano lair, not because of a cartoon villain pressing a red button, because that's how the system is designed to work. And now we get to the part that sounds fake until you realize it's basic math. When money is created in our system, it's created through debt. Let's say a government borrows $1 trillion at 5% interest. $1 trillion is created. That's the principle. But the obligation is $1 trillion plus $50 billion in interest. Here's the catch. That extra $50 billion was never created. It doesn't exist. So how do you pay it? You can't, unless more debt is created. Which means system-wide total debt always exceeds the money supply. Always. Debt can never be fully repaid. Ever. It's not a bug. It's the engine. To keep the system functioning, borrowing must continue, growth must continue, expansion must continue. And every year, about $15 trillion flows from borrowers to lenders as interest. From workers, taxpayers, consumers, and governments to asset holders. The top 1% captures about 40% of that flow. The top 0.1% captures about 20%, and the top 0.01% captures about 10%. That's about 800,000 people receiving on average nearly $2 million a year in interest income. Not from creating something, not from innovating, but from owning claims on debt. Meanwhile, the other 8 billion people fund those payments through taxes, wages, and prices. You work, you buy things, you pay taxes, the interest quietly moves upward. This is the wealth concentration mechanism, not a conspiracy, a design. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Debt grows, assets concentrate, interest compounds, power follows. And remember, debt doubles roughly every 10 years. 317 trillion becomes 500 plus. At some point, the interest alone exceeds what the real economy can sustain. When that happens, there are only 3 exits: default, inflation, or a jubilee, and every one of those outcomes hits the middle class first, while those who hold real assets, multiple currencies, and diversified holdings are protected. That's not pessimism. That's arithmetic. And that brings us back to the original question. If everyone owes money, who is the lender? It's not the world. It's not the future. It's a small global elite operating through central banks they influence, institutions they own, and assets they control. That's the answer. And in the next part, we're going to talk about why the system keeps going even though it can't end well, why it feels invisible until suddenly it isn't, and why everyone somehow senses something is wrong, even if they can't quite explain it. Now here's the strange part. If this system is mathematically unsustainable, and the numbers are right there in front of everyone, why does it keep going? Why doesn't the world just stop, look at the spreadsheet, and say, yeah, this is not going to work? Because no one experiences the system all at once. You experience it as rent going up, as taxes creeping higher, as prices rising even though your paycheck feels stuck in traffic, as government saying, we need to borrow just a little more. It never arrives as a single dramatic moment. It arrives as 1,000 small annoyances that feel disconnected. That's how it stays invisible. And the people at the top don't need secrecy. They need complexity. When a system is complicated enough, most people assume someone smarter has already checked the math. They assume adults are in the room. But here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is steering this thing toward an ending. They're steering it toward continuity. Because for the lenders, the system works beautifully. Every new dollar of debt is a new asset. Every crisis is an opportunity to consolidate. Every bailout is protection for the top and a bill for everyone else. And here's where the humor gets dark. The system doesn't require evil intent. It only requires incentives. If you're an institution holding massive debt assets, you want stability, not repayment. You don't want the debt gone. You want it serviced. You want interest payments to keep flowing forever. From your perspective, the perfect borrower never pays off the loan. They just keep paying. Which is why governments are ideal customers. They don't die. They don't retire. They don't disappear. They just roll the debt forward. And every time they do, the interest clock resets. Now think about how this feels from the borrower side. You're told debt is normal, responsible, even patriotic. Borrow for education. Borrow for housing. Borrow to stimulate the economy. Borrow to survive a crisis. Borrow because not borrowing would be irresponsible. And when repayment becomes difficult, the narrative shifts. It's your fault. You didn't plan properly. You should have worked harder. But zoom out and you realize the system requires most people to always be in debt. Because if everyone stopped borrowing, the asset side collapses. No new debt means no new money. No new money means no growth. No growth means asset prices fall. And asset prices falling is the one thing the system will not tolerate. That's why debt is treated like oxygen. Take a deep breath of borrowing, exhale interest. Repeat. And when something threatens that rhythm, like a recession or financial panic, the response is always the same. More liquidity, more support, more borrowing. Not because it fixes the problem, but because it delays the consequences. Think of it like stacking chairs on a sinking ship. Everyone agrees the ship is taking on water, but no one wants to stop rearranging the furniture because rearranging pays well. And here's where it gets personal. You might think, okay, but I don't owe trillions. I'm just one person. True, but the system aggregates your effort. Your taxes help service government debt. Your labor supports corporate profits. Your consumption sustains prices. Your retirement savings are invested back into the same system. You're both inside it and feeding it. It's like being inside a casino where the walls are also slot machines. Now let's talk about the future without introducing any new numbers or timelines. As debt continues to grow, servicing it becomes harder. Governments face impossible choices: raise taxes, cut services, borrow more. None of those reduce the debt. They just change who feels the pain. And remember those three outcomes: default, inflation, or jubilee. Default sounds dramatic, but it usually doesn't look like everyone walking away at once. It looks like restructurings, cuts, austerity, broken promises. Inflation is quieter. It doesn't cancel the debt. It reduces its real value. Assets adjust. Prices rise. Those without assets fall behind. A jubilee sounds fair, but historically it never lands evenly. The well-connected protect their holdings. The rules change, but power stays put. So no matter which door the system walks through, the result is the same. The middle absorbs the shock. The top preserves position. And this is why people feel uneasy even when things look fine on the surface. They sense the imbalance. They sense that the game rewards ownership over effort, access over contribution, capital over labor. They sense that working harder doesn't move the needle the way it used to. And they're right. Because the game isn't broken, it's functioning exactly as designed. The debt isn't a side effect, it's the product. The concentration isn't accidental, it's mechanical. And the most important thing to understand is this: you don't need to believe in villains to recognize incentives. If a system funnels wealth upward every year, those at the top will defend that system, not with speeches, with policy, with complexity, with reassurance. You're imagining things. This is normal. There's no alternative. But alternatives always exist. They just threaten existing assets. And that's the real answer to the $317 trillion question. The lender is not some abstract concept. It's a small group whose wealth grows as long as debt grows, whose power increases as complexity increases, and whose position is safest when everyone else believes the system is too big to question. Once you see that, the headlines start making sense. The bailouts, the endless borrowing, the insistence that growth must continue. Not because it benefits everyone, but because it protects the lenders. And the final irony: the system depends on participation. It requires belief, compliance, normalcy. It only works if most people keep playing without asking who's keeping score. That doesn't mean panic. It doesn't mean despair. It means clarity. Because once you understand who the lender is, you stop blaming yourself for a structure that was never meant to balance. And that understanding is the first thing that actually threatens the system. Not anger, not outrage, awareness. That's the real story behind global debt. Not numbers, not charts, but incentives, ownership, and a system that quietly answers one simple question. If everyone owes money, the lender is not everyone. It's the few. And now you know who.